Hi, Catherine. How are you?
I'm good, Isabella. How are you doing?
I'm doing well on this
Great.
little chilly day here in Boston. It's been a beautiful fall.
Yes, yes. I just have to say that just yesterday I took a photograph coming out of my house of a tree with golden leaves on one side and snow on the other side. Somehow the way the snow fell. So it was really a unique day here where you felt like winter collided with fall.
That's beautiful. Well, Catherine, you are one of the most beloved pianists and composers and a clinician, masterclass teachers, and the list just goes on. Such a privilege, to sit down and to hear your story and how you got here today.
Well, I would say, the more I look back on how I got where I am in terms of, this how my career took place, it's a lot of an accident, but a very lucky accident. All created by starting with my family and the way I was brought up, which was um, very much that my parents really just loved culture and everything. And I would say their primary love was music and all kinds of music, primarily classical, but they listened to sort of quasi pop opera with Mario Lanza but they listened to a lot of opera. They listened to My father just listened to piano concertos, violin concertos all the time. And so it was in a different time too when the the parents ran the household and they had a record player that was going all the time and people didn't listen on headphones and that sort of thing. And so, you look back on it and you say, gee, now if my daughter would say, I have to study, I have to do this, and you couldn't overtake the whole house with your music. Um, but it's at that time we just heard everything that my father primarily chose to play, and I was exposed to so much music. So I would say that the very first time I accompanied a student on the Schumann piano concerto, I was sight reading it, but I also knew it from memory. And I knew the orchestra part, so I barely had to read the music because that was probably my father's favorite piano concerto. So I was very fortunate, exposed to so much great music. And add in, though, my parents were multifaceted. They were great ballroom dancers, and they literally tangoed from room to room in our house. And I saw great ballroom dancing going on in my house all the time. And as I said, since it was just a regular small ranch house, but they would go from room to room. So I was exposed to music, but dance and life around the arts.
How did you start on the piano?
To say with starting on the piano, it was my mom was really quite a good pianist. She had studied piano through about age 16 and had formal studies. My dad never had the opportunity in Europe to study, but when he came here as an adult, he said, I want to take violin lessons. But he never sounded great, but he had a good ear, so he could figure out anything by ear. And my mom had an incredible ear, and she could chord and play and accompany him on anything. So they almost never had music for anything. They just gathered around and they literally created little family musicals um, at least once a month spontaneously. My dad would say to my mom, "Come on, let's play," and they would just that was they would just play music for fun, and some of it folk music, beautiful songs that they did one that they just loved, uh, and my mom played by ear and he played by ear a lot of it, and then as time marched on, when I got to be about 4, I know that sounds crazy, but my uh, I started myself playing a lot of things by ear. And by the time and my sister, who is 4.5 years older than me, she already was stepping in case my mom had do something in the kitchen or something, she would step in as the substitute because she played incredibly by ear. And so by the time I was maybe about 5 or 6, I started replacing my sister and my mom and playing by ear. So, and I started lessons when I was 7. I'm going to say that from a very early age, I just started, like, I just enjoyed sitting down at the piano and just playing by ear. And then I love making up variations of things and making my own arrangements. And, I would, when I was 7 years old, I bought my first non classical album. My first record purchase was Beethoven Concerto Number 1 with Leonard Bernstein conducting and playing. And then my non classical first purchase was The Sound of Music. So I loved the Broadway version, and I loved just, finding the songs and making, playing them on by ear. And then I would do my own arrangements of them. And I had so much fun doing that. So I think that's sort of how I got into the track of starting to really compose.
Did you have a moment that you realized, I really like composing and I'm going to go with it? Or was it more of a that you figure out that later, when you become, older?
Yeah, I would say that I started in high school writing real original music without any particular goal in mind for it. And then when I was playing at a lesson of mine, my teacher was Musicale, who in the Detroit area, where I've lived my whole life basically, he was really quite legendary because he was the Detroit Symphony Orchestra pianist, and it was considered a super honor to be one of his students. And I was, a lot of his students were very serious minded. They, one of them ended up becoming a director at Juilliard, and winners of, one of them was Ruth Laredo, who recorded the complete works of Scriabin and Rachmaninoff. I hung in there because, once a week I practiced 5 hours and I always had something new to play at the lesson. And he really loved me, and he thought I was really talented and suggested that I work a little harder. But I would say that what happened was that I played him a couple of my compositions, and he said, "Wow, those were really good." And his wife, the next week I came back, and she was very critical of things, and he told me afterwards that she said, "What was that she was playing? The melody stayed with me all day." And he said, "You should consider composition major." And I thought, coming from him, with his training from, Von Sauer and Courteau, and his, even he had even played for Rachmaninoff on a few occasions. So I thought, if he told me that, maybe I should consider it. So that was sort of how the idea started. Outside of my family, I have just one child. I have a beautiful daughter who's very talented in music, but does very, very different music than myself. But I would say that being a parent has been an influence in just even having me have a broader view of everything, and always trying to see things through the fresh eyes of your child. I would say that helped me a lot in terms of, just opening up my world, but it's also helped me musically, because one of my favorite series, and one of the series of music that really has had universal appeal, that was translated into Japanese and into Chinese, is my Beanbag Zoo series. And that I had primarily written intermediate music, and lower intermediate to upper intermediate music. And then when my daughter was born, and then I kept thinking, well, what are we going to do about lessons for her? And starting when she was about 4 years old, um, we ended up starting with me being her teacher after much thought about where we were going to go. It ended up with me being her teacher, and I wanted to be have her play as her first solo for recital. I wanted it to be something that Mom wrote, and so that was how the Beanbag Zoo started, because at that time, Beanie Babies was a big fad. And now I'm happy to see there's kind of beanbag animals are back in the store. And so I was writing for her basically, and she absolutely participated because I would write these little pieces. And the very first one I wrote was called Creepy Crocodile. And I was making up the words, and it was one hand at a time because that was going to be her star first piece at her first recital. And it was, see that creepy crocodile crawling up to me. Then, and she was crawling on the carpet on our upstairs piano, and she was singing the words because she already knew the words. And then at that point she said, when I went on that was the only time the hands played together, and she said, "Yikes!" And I said, "Honey, that's great. Can I add that into the song?" Because yikes wasn't there for that one time they play hands together. So she said, "Yes, Mom, but only if you give me credit." So as I tell you the story, I'm giving her credit for yikes that entered into the song. But she influenced me a lot with that series because every piece that I wrote for the series passed her stamp of approval.
What's your favorite?
Well, I would say that in every series that I've started, and some of them are now complete, and I don't won't be going back to them, but every one is just completely close to my heart as a composer, musician, and teacher, because every one of them is meant to really um, bring music and understanding to students, and whatever level it's at, my intention is to create music that is might have some challenges, but not challenges that can't be met at that level. So make students more beautiful phrasing, uh, more control over articulation, development of rubato, development of colors and sound. But I'm always hopeful that I try very hard from my experience as a teacher to make it something that will not only be possible, but will help the student grow, and but not in a way that they won't enjoy playing the piece. So I want them to be challenged, but ultimately when they master the piece, it doesn't have challenges that you say, "Uh-oh, here's that part coming up." Because I think that happens so much in music, and that's one of the things that um, cause all of us performers some anxiety is, and so even of course, and that's I think the goal, and one of the most important things of a pedagogical composer is to not cause any anxiety, and let the students feel mastery and feel like they can enjoy playing it. So, and I'm not saying that Chopin and Liszt are trying to cause anxiety.
You're a fantastic teacher. I can just see from your students. I imagine that's very helpful for your composition work, right?
I think what has happened, and when I said, how did I get here from wherever I started, um, being being a teacher has turned out to be sort of a dream job for me, because again, so many of these things, because when, as I said, I had this incredible opportunity starting to study with Musicale, and actually I was with him 7 years, and even though I portray myself as relatively lazy, I felt I was relatively lazy because he had students practicing, 3 to 6 hours a day as a rule, and those were the kind of students, and I was able to hang in there because I was pretty talented and could consume at least one piece new to show off to him every week. But I got really serious about piano when I was really essentially pursuing my bachelor and master's degree. And then I thought I was going to maybe just try and do a degree in chamber music. And I just started teaching as an sort of an accidental tie over thing. And I turned out to love it. And everything became intertwined when I started doing the composing that was pedagogical. So for me, I feel that by trying to create music, really understanding how students play well if they can have their arm weight aligned in their body in these small, like 5 finger position kind of pieces, and helping my students understand how to get their arm weight into this nice small hand position has very much influenced my teaching of through from the beginning through very, very advanced players, because I'm always trying to get advanced players to get into aligned positions as I try and do in my writing. But now it's not in the writing, like if you're in Liszt and you're in Chopin and Rachmaninoff, but I try and almost treat the teaching of it technically as if I was teaching a teaching piece and get them feeling so aligned and try and make those challenging passages that would otherwise be the part where you're freezing and saying, uh-oh, here that comes. I'm trying to help my students to see it and get physically so comfortable that they are as undaunted by it as they would be when they're at the level of playing an early intermediate teaching piece. So obviously it's easier said than done, but I think that being a writer of pedagogical music and being very concerned about the comfort level of it has helped me a lot in teaching really, really major literature and getting students to be comfortable physically with it.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I'm so looking forward to your mini course. Um, what do you think you'll be mostly sharing with us? Just a little glimpse.
Well, I think, my latest series, just to say, has been Museum Masterpieces, which started out as a book 1 through 4, then was added on an A and B because the teachers were saying they would love their elementary students to play it. And now I'm completing a book 5 of Museum Masterpieces and very excited about it. And just as a quick glimpse, is I've always been an art lover, and go back to my parents. They took myself and my sister to the Detroit Art Institute all the time. And we went there as young children. I hung out there as a teenager. Instead of going to the mall, I hung out with my friends at the DIA. And always been a great art lover. For years, a series like this was on my mind, and happily the publisher agreed to it, where I said I'm always using imagery in my teaching and pulling out paintings by Monet or that sort of thing to inspire a student playing Debussy or whatever. So I said, but I would love to do the turnaround and write original music that I was inspired to write upon looking at a great work of art. And so happily that series came into being, and I feel that it's really helped students in so many ways. And so besides that, I hope that they just like the music. It's by seeing artwork, because the artwork is included in the books, and then playing the pieces that was inspired by the artwork, students much more feel like, oh, I'm telling a story. I feel like that's the piece of art that inspired this piece of music. And I think it helps students to think of color, and if there's water in the piece, I feel like I'm creating water right now. And but they've seen the artwork, so it's a real blend of imagery, art imagery with music. And I've heard my own students, as well as many students that I've heard at master classes and who've sent me tapes, play with just flair and color. And so I'd like to tell you more about it and show you some examples when we have our little longer talk.
That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.